Testing, no. There we go. That was weird. That should be working now. Sorry about that. I don't know why, but on my stream setup, um, it had disabled the microphone in my settings. Hopefully that gets it working. Now you hear something. Is it sound normal? Hi, puppy. What's in front of his... Oh, the cardboard box. I don't know why, I'm looking so washed out. For some reason, the, camera is adjusting very bright, it seems like. Because it's not that bright in here. The blinds are closed. I'm not currently, like, blinded by the light. Lit up. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if there's a way for me to... If I do like this. Oh. What would it be? Contrast, maybe? Turn down the contrast. Oh no, I made it. Did that make it worse? Oh, what have I done? Cancel, default. Just turn down the brightness a bit. And grab this little bit of fluff that's in my hair, apparently. A secondary fluff. Help me. I don't know. Whatever. I'll get it later. No, I can't. I gotta get it now. Robakio. Hello. Alright. Whatever. Brightness adjusting. Done. What's going on over here in chat? Audio problem. Now they hear something. Open the blinds, says Varmos. Sharky say maybe just the rest of us is like sunshine. What is the madness? How's it going? It's been a little while. We're on our last 20 pages of the book today. I'm still looking pretty washed out. Maybe I will try opening the blinds and see if somehow adding more light makes it less bright. That's logic, right? Bit of a rhyming thing going on. That may have done it, actually. Sharkies were outside walking with the kids in the rain. Mr. Sharky was wearing quite an effective raincoat. Rain completely ran off him and onto his pants. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, we went and visited friends on the weekend. I made a second attempt at pad thai because couple weekends ago I tried making pad thai and I oversoaked the noodles, or technically what I did is I used water that was too hot for the rice noodles because just their tap water on hot turns out was really hot and I wasn't used to that. And so the noodles kind of turned into a mush and I wasn't happy about that, so I needed to redeem myself. So I made pad thai this weekend and it turned out quite well. Yeah. Definitely still like room for improvement, but much better. Much better. The noodles were actually noodle-like. Roakio says that would have been disappointing. Everyone else basically enjoyed it except for me, I think. But yes, this time was much better. And then visited my mom and also Farmouse's parents on Monday. My mom is back home now after 2.5 weeks in the hospital. Um, yeah. The brightness is still a little odd, isn't it? My cheek looks like radiating. Yeah, it's better that she's home. She's hopefully gonna regain some strength, I hope. When we went and saw her, they've got her now set up with like a medical bed at home, and she's getting home care visits like 4 times a day or something. And yeah, she's back with her dogs, so that's good too. And family, but um, but I think she actually got up and had a small walk today with help. So got out of bed. So that's how our weekend went, basically. Um, yeah. And now we are sort of just cleaning up our house a bit and attempting to get it to the point where we're ready to bring our real estate agent over to have a look-see and tell us what could use fixing up before we list it, and then we're going to try and do that stuff. Robakio got to go to Bouchard Gardens. I like Bouchard Gardens. It is very pretty there. Oh, and yeah, this is probably a great time of year for that. You were lucky it was a late spring bloom and early summer, so lots was in bloom. Wow. That's great. Yeah. So where's Robakio? Where are you at in Wyrd Sisters? Have you been following at all? You have read this one before, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Which I am kind of just taking a shot in the dark with that. I don't know, no idea. No, way behind? Okay. Well, we've only got 20 pages left where we're at. So last Friday, we kind of powered through a little more of it than I was expecting to, mostly because there just wasn't a break in the scenes. It was sort of the climactic play scene just in time for the dramatic conclusion. Yeah, there last week they were putting on a play for Duke Felmet. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting the way the play came together, because you kind of knew how it was supposed to happen, because how it's supposed to happen is what happened in Hamlet. But that's not what was happening, and so you kind of didn't know exactly how they were going to get from what was happening to what was supposed to happen, if that makes sense. um, at least that's how I felt about it. And then, yeah, because they were performing the play as Duke Felmet wanted it to be. And it was interesting how it was Duke Felmet's meddling that ended up pushing things in the direction to his own downfall. Right? Partway through the play, he's feeling so successful and riding high on that, and orders the witches arrested, and then the witches from the play are the ones that get arrested, and the actual witches end up on stage in the play where they can push things in a slightly different direction. It's an interesting way to change the plot. I lift my hand up and the brightness shifts drastically. Put my hand down and it brightens back up. I don't know what's going on with my camera right now. Maybe I'll just leave my hand up here so that it thinks that this is what needs to be all bright and washed out. Or maybe now that the blinds are open, I can readjust the video. Oh well. Oh, I'm out of focus. Yeah, maybe I just am leaning back too far. Maybe if I adjust my chair. Although now there's this super bright wall behind me, but whatever. Like listening to a radio with a wonky antenna. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's just unusual, and so that sends my brain going like, need to make this more usual. But yeah, that's sort of the basic summary of what happened last time. I don't see BBB, Books, Brews, and Booze. I'll send them a message, just... just in case. Because they've been here for almost the entirety of it. It'd be kind of let down to miss the very end. How was everybody else's week so far? Weekend and week. Since we're now midweek. Anything interesting? Any downtime? Anyone's pants get soaked? We already got that story. The weather has been very rubber bandy. Robakio's gotten into Horizon Forbidden West. I have yet to touch that game, which is kind of on track for how I played Zero Dawn. It took me a long time to actually get around to playing that. Mrs. Sharkey started a new sewing project, a summer skirt. Ooh. That sounds nice. What kind of fabric? Does it have a pattern? Does it have flowers? Or dinosaurs? Farmo says, I feel like I already know the answer, but does it have pockets? Like Rawakio said about the time flying. It is. We are over a week into June of 2022. It does not feel like it should be June to me right now. Black but thin with embroidered black flowers, and yes, it will have pockets. And a ruffle at the hem. Ooh! Yeah, I don't know where this year's been going. There's just been... I think it's partly been going so quickly. It feels like there have been a lot of things happening, and then like gaps in between those things without much happening. But like a lot of, I don't know, big things. And so it's like a big event happens, and then you kind of coast for a week. And then a big event happens, and you kind of coast for a week. And I think as a result of that, this year is just kind of, half of this year has just kind of vanished for me. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, I don't know. This has been a difficult year so far. Sharky say, I think the last 2 years have taught us that time might fly when you're having fun, but it also flies when nothing happens and every day is the same. Yeah, that's not quite what's been happening for me. There's been a lot happening this year. Not very many good things. I don't mean to be dramatic or anything, but there's been a lot of difficulties this year. And I think a lot of things that I don't really care to put much thought into remembering. And so as a result, it's like there's been a lot of stuff to deal with, but not much, but like stuff that I'm trying to avoid thinking about maybe, and as a result, maybe the year has vanished because of that. I don't know. Pharma says, I mean, it's been sort of both. So it flies during both the high activity and during the downtime when nothing is happening? Yeah, I guess so. Sharky say humans need holidays and such to mentally mark the passage of time. Yeah, that's something that we haven't been getting, is any kind of holiday. Because our when we were supposed to be in Japan has now officially come and gone. And we haven't really, like, there were a few years where we went to Mexico during the winter with Farmos's parents. But we haven't been able to do that for the past 3 years or whatever. But they're talking about doing that maybe this coming winter, this next winter. That would be nice. So, yeah, Farmos and I haven't really gone anywhere since 2019, I think. Other than, to and from Chilliwack. Sorry. Didn't mean for this to turn into a downer kind of thing. Robot Kyo's feeling in the same situation. Yeah. A lot of us are going through some difficult stuff lately. Well, why don't we move on to something a little more fun? Also, yeah, so we've got 20 pages to go. I figure we can probably power through that tonight. And then what? What comes next? What's after Wyrd Sisters? This book's been a lot of fun, but what are we going to read after that? I think I kind of assumed that we were going to go back to the Belgariad, but then, that's not necessarily, doesn't have to be the case. I think it sort of depends on what everybody wants to do, as per usual. So, think about that a little bit, and then we'll have to decide, either tonight or on Friday, I guess. See how long this takes, why don't we? So, on Friday, I did kind of stop right in the middle of the scene, just because there wasn't a better place to stop without, and it was getting pretty late at that point. So I think we were kind of, let's see, the Duchess had kind of been screaming at the witches and shouting them down and calling them weak and whatever, and then Nanny Ogg clunked her over the head with a cauldron. In media res. Kinda. Doesn't quite technically fit the definition, I don't think. Maybe it does. Maybe it technically does. Oh, for you. Yeah, that's fair. So, yeah, Nanny Ogg hit her in the back of the head with the cauldron. And, that's where we stopped, I believe. So, in my copy, we're on the middle of page 245, and this book goes to page 265. So, I'm going to just recap that. At this point, ready? Nanny Ogg hit her on the back of the head with the cauldron. "She does go on, doesn't she said conversationally, as the Duchess collapsed. "She was a bit eccentric, if you ask me." There was a long, embarrassed silence. Granny Weatherwax coughed. Then she treated the soldiers, holding her, to a bright, friendly smile, and pointed to the mound that was now the Duchess. "Take her away and put her in a cell somewhere," she commanded. The men snapped to attention, grabbed the Duchess by her arms, and pulled her upright with considerable difficulty. "Gently, mind," said Granny. She rubbed her hands together and turned to Tom John, who was watching her with his mouth open. "Depend on it," she hissed. "Here and now, my lad. You don't have a choice. You're the king of Lancre." "But I don't know how to be a king." "We all seed you. You had it down just right, including the shouting." "That's just acting." "Act, then. Being a king is... Granny hesitated and snapped her fingers at Magrat. "What do you call them things? There's always 100 of them in anything." Magrat looked bewildered. "Do you mean percents?" she said. "Them," agreed Granny. "Most of the percents in being a king is acting, if you ask me. You ought to be good at it." Tom John looked for help into the wings, where Hwell should have been. The dwarf was, in fact, there, but he wasn't paying much attention. He had the script in front of him, and he was rewriting furiously. "But I assure you, you are not dead. Take it from me." If you can't tell, that's Death speaking. The Duke giggled. He had found a sheet from somewhere and had draped it over himself, and was sidling along some of the castle's more deserted corridors. Sometimes he would go, "Whoo!" in a low voice. This worried Death. He was used to people claiming that they were not dead, because death always came as a shock, and a lot of people had some trouble getting over it. But people claiming that they were dead with every breath in their body was a new and unsettling experience. "I shall jump out on people," said the Duke dreamily. "I shall rattle my bones all night. I shall perch on the roof and foretell a death in the house." "That's banshees." "I shall if I want," said the Duke, with a trace of earlier determination. "And I shall float through walls, and knock on tables, and drip ectoplasm on anyone I don't like. Ha! Ha!" "It won't work. Living people aren't allowed to be ghosts. I'm sorry." Robot Kyo says, "I'm not sure if death is one of his favorite characters or if he just really likes the writing in the scenes he's in. Are those the same?" Farmos thinks they're close. I guess with a favorite character, you would enjoy the way that character behaves. The things they do, the way they speak, their style, or whatever, some traits about them. So, if that holds true for death, then yeah, that's one of your favorite characters. But if it's just all of the stuff that happens around death, then I guess it's more of a, you just enjoy it when death shows up. Robot Kyo thinks he's just kind of like the ultimate straight man, always serious. He did do a little tap dance earlier in this book, 20 pages ago or something. The Duke made an unsuccessful attempt to float through a wall, gave up, and opened a door out onto a crumbling section of the battlements. The storm had died away a bit, and a thin rind of moon lurked behind the clouds, like a ticket tout for eternity. A ticket tout? T-O-U-T? A thin rind of moon lurked behind the clouds, like a ticket tout for eternity. Anyone want to hazard a guess at what a ticket tout is? Does it mean lurk behind the clouds like a ticket taker? Is that someone who they've got maybe a little stall that they're sitting in? Is that what the moon's supposed to be? The clouds are like a little stall and the moon is there to take your ticket? That's my best guess. Pharma says it's apparently another name for a scalper. Okay. Alright. Not the most clear metaphor to me. Death stalked through the wall behind him. "Well, then," said the Duke, "if I'm not dead, why are you here?" He jumped up onto the wall and flapped his sheet. "Waiting." "Wait forever, bone-face," said the Duke triumphantly. "I shall hover in the twilight world. I shall find some chains to shake. I shall—" He stepped backward, lost his balance, landed heavily on the wall, and slid. For a moment, the remnant of his right hand scrabbled ineffectually at the stonework, and then it vanished. Death is obviously potentially everywhere at the same time. And in one sense, it is no more true to say that he was on the battlements, picking vaguely at non-existent particles of glowing metal on the edge of his scythe blade, than that he was waist-deep in the foaming, rock-toothed waters in the depths of Lancre Gorge, his calcareous gaze, sweeping downward and stopping abruptly at a point where the torrent ran a few treacherous inches over a bed of angular pebbles. After a while, the Duke sat up, transparent in the phosphorescent waves. "I shall haunt their corridors," he said, "and whisper under the doors on still nights." His voice grew fainter, almost lost in the ceaseless roar of the river. "I shall make basket chairs creak most alarmingly. Just you wait and see." Death grinned at him. "Now you're talking." It started to rain. Ramtop rain has a curiously penetrative quality, which makes ordinary rain seem almost arid. It poured in torrents over the castle roofs, and somehow seemed to go right through the tiles, and fill the great hall with a warm, uncomfortable moistness. Footnote: like Bognor. Capital B, lowercase OGNOR. Random burn on Bognor, I guess? Who or what is Bognor? End of footnote. 2 words. Robakio says, "Ouch, poor Bognor." I have no idea. Farmer says, "A town and seaside resort in West Sussex." It poured in torrents over the castle roofs and somehow seemed to go right through the tiles and fill the great hall with a warm, uncomfortable moistness, like Bognor. Don't vacation in Bognor, I guess. Unless you like warm, uncomfortable moistness. Although considering uncomfortable is part of the descriptive, I don't know. Ravakio says, "Sir Terry has something against Bognor, man." Right? Random burn on Bognor. Shark, you say, "Sure, it's a burn, but you better believe any residents who read to this part also probably appreciate the shout-out." The first time they've seen their town name in print outside of the local newspaper. Maybe Bognor's actually very well known and I'm just not educated on it, who knows. Anyways, the hall was crowded with half the population of Lancre. Outside, the rushing of the rain even drowned out the distant roar of the river. It soaked the stage. The colors ran and mingled in the painted backdrop, and one of the curtains sagged away from its rail and flapped sadly into a puddle. Inside, Granny Weatherwax finished speaking. "You forgot about the crown," whispered Nanny Og. "Ah," said Granny. "Yes, the crown. It's on his head, d'ye see? We hid it among the crowns when the actors left, the reason being, no one would look for it there. See how it fits him so perfectly." It was a tribute to Granny's extraordinary powers of persuasion that everyone did see how perfectly it fitted Tom John. In fact, the only one who didn't was Tom John himself, who was aware that it was only his ears that were stopping it becoming a necklace. "Imagine the sensation when he put it on for the first time," she went on. I expect there was an eldritch tingling sensation. Actually, it felt rather, Tom John began, but no one was listening to him. He shrugged and leaned over to Hwel, who was still scribbling busily. Does eldritch mean uncomfortable? He hissed. The dwarf looked at him with unfocused eyes. What? I said, does eldritch mean uncomfortable? Eh? Oh, no. No, I shouldn't think so. What does it mean, then? Dunno. Oblong, I think. I feel like that definition is going to skew my perception of a few different beings going forward. The oblong horrors. Hwel's glance returned to his scrawls as though magnetized. Can you remember what he said after all those tomorrows? I didn't catch the bit after that. And there wasn't any need for you to tell everyone I was adopted, said Tom John. That's how it was, you see, said the dwarf vaguely. Best to be honest about these things. Now then, did he actually stab her, or just accuse her? I don't want to be a king, Tom John whispered hoarsely. Everyone says I take after Dad. Funny thing, all this taking after people, said the dwarf vaguely. I mean, if I took after my dad, I'd be 100 feet underground digging rocks, whereas... Sharky say, turns out Cthulhu is just an egg. Very eldritch. His voice died away. He stared at the nib of his pen as though it held an incredible fascination. Whereas what? Eh? Aren't you even listening? I knew it was wrong when I wrote it. I knew it was the wrong way round. What? Oh, yes. Be a king. It's a good job. It seems there's a lot of competition at any rate. I'm very happy for you. Once you're a king, you can do anything you want. Tom John looked at the faces of the Lenker worthies around the table. They had a keen, calculating look, like the audience at a fat stock show. Is that like a livestock show? Fat stock? Is that like they're going to buy cows? Rakio says, I was thinking like Woodstock. I don't think the audience at a Woodstock show has a keen, calculating look. Maybe I'm wrong. I think they might have different looks than that, though. They were weighing him up. Yeah, I think it's more like buying cows and things. They're just a little eldritch there. It crept upon him in a cold and clammy way that once he was a king, he could do anything he wanted, provided that what he wanted to do was be king. Farmers confirms livestock. You could build your own theater, said Hwel, his eyes lighting up for a moment, with as many trapdoors as you wanted, and magnificent costumes. You could act in a new play every night. I mean, it would make the disc look like a shed. Who would come to see me? Said Tom John, sagging in his seat. Everyone. What, every night? You could order them to, said Hwel, without looking up. I knew he was going to say that, Tom John thought. He can't really mean it, he added charitably. He's got his play. He doesn't really exist in this world. Not right now, at the moment. He took off the crown and turned it over and over in his hands. There wasn't much metal in it, but it felt heavy. He wondered how heavy it would get if you wore it all the time. At the head of the table was an empty chair containing, he had been assured, the ghost of his real father. It would have been nice to report that he had experienced anything more, when being introduced to it, than an icy sensation and a buzzing in his ears. "I suppose I could help Father pay off on the disc," he said. "That would be nice, yes," said Well. He spun the crown in his fingers and listened glumly to the talk flowing back and forth over his head. 15 years, said the mayor of Lancre. "We had to," said Granny Weatherwax. "I thought the baker was a bit early last week." No, said the witch impatiently. "It doesn't work like that. No one's lost anything." "According to my figuring," said the man who doubled as Lancre's beadle, town clerk, and gravedigger. Beadle? B-E-A-D-L-E? "According to my figuring," said the man who doubled as Lancre's beadle, town clerk, and gravedigger, "we've all lost 15 years. "No, we've all gained them," said the mayor. "It stands to reason. Time's like this sort of wiggly road, see? But we took a shortcut across the fields." Officer of the church. Ah, yes, I do think I've heard that one before. "Not at all," said the clerk, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. "Look here." Tom John let the waters of debate close over him again. Everyone wanted him to be king. No one thought twice about what he wanted. His views didn't count. Yes, that was it. No one wanted him to be king. Not precisely him. He just happened to be convenient. Gold does not tarnish, at least physically, but Tom John felt that the thin band of metal in his hands had an unpleasant depth to its luster. It had sat on too many troubled heads. If you held it to your ear, you could hear the screams. I didn't think the crown was made of gold. I thought it was made of iron or something. Am I remembering that wrong? It was described somewhere back near the beginning, but... He became aware of someone else looking at him, their gaze playing across his face, like a blow lamp on a lolly. He looked up. It was the third witch, the youngest one, with the intense expression and the hedgerow hairstyle, sitting next to Old Fool, as though she owned a controlling interest. It wasn't his face she was examining. It was his features. Her eyeballs were tracking him from nape to nose like a pair of calipers. He gave her a brave little smile, which she ignored. Just like everyone else, he thought. Only the fool noticed him, and returned the smile with an apologetic grin, and a tiny, conspiratorial wave of the fingers that said, "What are we doing here? Two sensible people like us." The woman was looking at him again, turning her head this way and that, and narrowing her eyes. She kept glancing at Fool and back to Tom John. Then she turned to the oldest witch, the only person in the entire hot, damp room who seemed to have acquired a mug of beer, and whispered in her ear. Pharma says, "I think it was made of gold. It just doesn't look as gold as the fake gold crowns." Ah, that would make sense. The two started a spirited, whispered conversation. It was, thought Tom John, a particularly feminine way of talking. It normally took place on doorsteps, with all the participants standing with their arms folded, and, if anyone was so ungracious as to walk past, they'd stop abruptly and watch them in silence until they were safely out of earshot. He became aware that Granny Weatherwax had stopped talking, and that the entire hall was staring at him expectantly. "Hello?" he said. "It might be a good idea to hold the coronation tomorrow," said Granny. "It's not good for a kingdom to be without a ruler. It doesn't like it." She stood up, pushed back her chair, and came and took Tom John's hand. He followed her unprotestingly across the flagstones and up the steps to the throne, where she put her hands on his shoulders and pressed him gently down onto the threadbare red plush cushions. There was a scraping of benches and chairs. He looked around in panic. "What's happening now?" he said. "Don't worry," said Granny firmly. "Everyone wants to come and swear loyalty to you. You just nod graciously and ask everyone what they do and if they enjoy it. Oh, and you'd better give them the crown back." Tom John removed it quickly. "Why?" he said. "They want to present it to you." "But I've already got it," said Tom John desperately. Granny gave a patient sigh. "Only in the what's-name, real sense," she said. "This is more ceremonial." "You mean unreal?" "Yes," said Granny, "but much more important." Tom John gripped the arms of the throne. "Fetch me Hwel," he said. "No, you must do it like that. It's precedent, you see. First you meet the—" "I said, fetch me the dwarf. Didn't you hear me, woman?" This time Tom John got the spin and pitch of his voice just right. But Granny rallied magnificently. "I don't think you quite realize who you are talking to, young man," she said. Tom John half rose in his seat. He had played a great many kings, and most of them weren't the kind of kings who shook hands graciously and asked people whether they enjoyed their work. They were far more the type of kings who got people to charge into battle at 5 o'clock on a freezing morning and still managed to persuade them that this was better than being in bed. He summoned them all and treated Granny Weatherwax to a blast of royal hauteur, pride, and arrogance. "We thought we were talking to a subject," he said. "Now do as we say." Granny's face was immobile for several seconds as she worked out what to do next. Then she smiled to herself, said lightly, "As you wish," and went and dislodged Hwel, who was still writing. The dwarf gave a stiff bow. "None of that," snapped Tom John. "What do I do next?" "I don't know. Do you want me to write an acceptance speech?" "I told you, I don't want to be king." "Could be a problem with an acceptance speech, then," the dwarf agreed. "Have you really thought about this? Being king is a great role." "But it's the only one you get to play." Well, just tell them no, then." "Just like that? Will it work?" "It's got to be worth a try." A group of Lancre dignitaries were approaching with the crown on a cushion. They wore expressions of constipated respect coupled with just a hint of self-satisfaction. They carried the crown as if it was a present for a good boy. No puppy back there. The mayor of Lancre coughed behind his hand. "A proper coronation will take some time to arrange," he began. "But we would like—" "No," said Tom John. The mayor hesitated. "Pardon?" he said. "I won't accept it." The mayor hesitated again. His lips moved, and his eyes glazed slightly. He felt that he had got lost somewhere, and decided it would be best to start again. "A proper coronation will take—" he ventured. "It won't," said Tom John. "I will not be king." The mayor was mouthing like a carp. "Well," said Tom John desperately, "you're good with words." "The problem we've got here," said the dwarf, "is that no is apparently not among the options when you are offered a crown. I think you could cope with maybe." Tom John stood up and grabbed the crown. He held it above his head like a tambourine. "Listen to me, all of you," he said. "I thank you for your offer. It's a great honor. But I can't accept it. I've worn more crowns than you can count, and the only kingdom I know how to rule has got curtains in front of it. I'm sorry." Dead silence greeted this. They did not appear to have been the right words. "Another problem," said Well conversationally, "is that you don't actually have a choice. You are the king, you see. It's a job you are lined up for when you're born." "I'd be no good at it." "That doesn't matter. The king isn't something you're good at. It's something you are." "You can't leave me here. There's nothing but forests." Tom John felt the suffocating cold sensation again, and the slow buzzing in his ears. For a moment he thought he saw, faint as a mist, a tall, sad man in front of him, stretching out a hand in supplication. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am." Through the fading shape, he saw the witches, watching him intently. Beside him, Quell said, "The only chance you'd have is if there was another heir. You don't remember any brothers and sisters, do you?" "I don't remember anyone. Well, There was another ferocious argument among the witches, and then Magrat was striding across the hall, moving like a tidal wave, moving like a rush of blood to the head, shaking off Granny Weatherwax's restraining hand, bearing down on the throne like a piston, and dragging the fool behind her. I find it interesting, the gamut of rulers we've had in this book. Because we started with King Verence being murdered, who was someone who was the king and loved the kingdom, right? Wanted to be king, loved the kingdom. Then we had Felmet, who wanted to be king and hated the kingdom. And then we've got Tom John, who doesn't want to be king and hates the kingdom. Just like, well, not hates necessarily. He doesn't hate it. He's just not interested. But, does not like the kingdom. So it's a strange mix of, like, you could make a chart of, wants to be king, likes kingdom, and put circles or X's. And I feel like so far we've got kind of 3 different categories there. I'm looking at this page. Trying to figure out who's speaking. Oh, no, I've got it. I say, hello-y. I say, excuse me, can anyone hear us? The castle up above was full of hubbub and general rejoicing, and there was no one to hear the polite and frantic voices that echoed along the dungeon passages, getting politer and more frantic with each passing hour. I say, excuse me, Billem's got this terrible thing about rats, if you don't mind. Cooey! Let the camera of the mind's eye pan slowly back along the dim ancient corridors, taking in the dripping fungi, the rusting chains, the damp, the shadows. Where's this footnote coming? Oh, later, okay. Can anyone hear us? Look, it's really too much. There's been some laughable mistake. Look, the wigs come right off. Let the plaintive echoes dwindle among the cobwebbed corners and the rodent-haunted tunnels, until they're no more than a reedy whisper on the cusp of hearing. I say, excuse me, help! Someone is bound to come down here again one of these days. Some time afterward, Magrat asked Hwel if he believed in long engagements. The dwarf paused in the task of loading up the laddie. Footnote. At least, of supervising the loading. Actual physical assistance was a little difficult because he had, the day before, slipped on something and broken his leg. End of footnote. About a week, maximum, he said at last. With matinees, of course. It's interesting how they handled this whole bit, right? Magrat's marching forward with the fool, and then it's kind of like, you know what happens from there. Except it doesn't even say that. It just skips it. A month went past. The early, damp earth odors of autumn drifted over the velvety dark moors, where the watery starlight was echoed by one spark of a fire. The standing stone was back in its normal place, but still poised to run if any auditors came into view. The witches sat in careful silence. This was not going to rate among the 100 most exciting coven meetings of all time. If Masorgsky had seen them, the night on the bare mountain would have been over by tea time. Masorgsky. Mussorgsky. Then Granny Weatherwax said, "It was a good banquet, I thought." "I was nearly sick," said Nanny Ogg proudly, "and my Cheryl helped out in the kitchen. It brought me home some scraps." "I heard," said Granny coldly, Half a pig and 3 bottles of fizzy wine went missing, they say. It's nice that some people think of the old folk, said Nanny Ogg, completely unabashed. I got a coronation mug, too. She produced it. There's something that's very British. It says, Viva Varence II Rex. Fancy him being called Rex. I can't say it's a good likeness, mind you. I don't recall him having a handle sticking out of his ear. There was another long, terribly polite pause. Then Granny said, We were a bit surprised you weren't there, Magrat. We thought you'd be up at the top of the table, kind of thing, said Nanny. We thought you'd have moved in up there. Magrat stared fixedly at her feet. I wasn't invited, she said meekly. Well, I don't know about invited, said Granny. We weren't invited. People don't have to invite witches. They just know we'll turn up if we want to. They soon find room for us, she added, with some satisfaction. You see, he's been very busy, said Magrat to her feet. Sorting everything out, you know. He's very clever, you know, underneath. Very sober, lad, said Nanny. Anyway, it's full moon, said Magrat quickly. You've got to go to coven meetings at full moon, no matter what other pressing engagements there may be. Have you? Nanny Ogg began, but Granny nudged her sharply in the ribs. It's a very good thing he's paying so much attention to getting the kingdom working again, said Granny soothingly. It shows proper consideration. Oh, BBB. BBAB. Trying to get Precious to eat. Hrokio says, just in time for the last few pages. Yeah, we have 10 pages to go. We had 20 pages to go, so you've missed exactly 10 pages. Would you like a recap? Apparently, Mussorgsky is a Russian composer who wrote songs about mountains. Tempted to listen, tempted to run away. I get that. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I can give you a quick recap. You can probably read them really fast. Alright. Well, then why don't you mute me and read to page 256. See if you can read 11 pages. You want the recap? You want the recap? I can do a recap. Which would you prefer? You want to speed read back up to where we are? Or you want to recap? Recap. Okay. So, where we left off last week, the Duchess was threatening the witches. Nanny Ogg thumped her over the head with a cauldron. And Granny ordered the soldiers to take her away to a cell in the dungeon somewhere, which they did. Then Granny declared that Tom John was king, whether he liked it or not. He did not like it. He tried to refuse. That didn't go so well. He kept trying to get advice from Quell, who was busily rewriting the play to include certain revelations that came out during the most recent performance, since he knew he'd gotten it backwards somehow. Tom Tom John tried to say no to the crown. They were like, well, that doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, Magrat was busily eyeing up his features and looking at the fool back and forth. Then Huel said, turns out you can't really say no unless you had maybe like a brother or a sister somewhere you weren't aware of, at which point Magrat came stomping up, dragging the fool along. You may recall that the fool's name was actually Varence. Then we had a little bit of a time skip. Yeah, and I think the actors departed. It was sort of implied that the fool became king. Nanny Og got a coronation mug. It says, "Viva Varence II Rex." So, yeah, the fool, shocking. Yes, we're all very surprised. Apparently, does anyone know what's up with the footnote about Huel breaking his leg? Is that a reference to a play or something? Is there a character who breaks their leg? Or, oh no, break your own leg. He literally broke his leg, break a leg. It's got to be that. Yeah, break your own leg. I'm guessing Magrat accidentally fully cursed him. I didn't really clue into that until just now. My leg! Slipped on something and broken his leg. Oy. Yeah, and that's basically where we're at. Also, it sounds like... Is it the good luck thing? Yeah. It sounds like maybe Magrat and the fool's relationship is not weathering the coronation so far. Sharky say, plus the actors who played the witches are calling out from the dungeons. I'm hoping they got released. Because that was before the month-long time skip, so hopefully they're not still in the dungeons. But who knows? And that's basically the past 10 pages, summed up. That's where we're at. We are currently... Oh, yeah, the Standing Stone just made an appearance. The Standing Stone was back in its normal place, but still poised to run if any auditors came into view. Yeah. So, that's where we're at. Magrat had not been invited to the coronation party. So I'm right at the bottom of page 255. It's a very good thing he's paying so much attention to getting the kingdom working again, said Granny soothingly. It shows proper consideration. I dare say he'll get around to everything, sooner or later. It's very demanding being a king. Yes, said Magrat, her voice barely audible. Poor Magrat. I don't think they ever had much of a relationship. It seemed like most of the time she was just angry at him. So, I don't know. It's probably for the best. I don't think it would have been healthy. The silence that followed was almost solid. It was broken by Nanny, in a voice as bright and brittle as ice. Well, I brought a bottle of that fizzy wine with me, she said. In case we felt like a drink, she rallied, and waved it at the other two. I don't want any, said Magrat sullenly. You drink up, girl, said Granny Weatherwax. It's a chilly night. It'd be good for your chest. She squinted at Magrat as the moon drifted out from behind its cloud. Here, she said, your hair looks a bit grubby. It looks as though you haven't washed it for a month. Magrat burst into tears. The same moon shone down on the otherwise unremarkable town of Ramnitz, some 90 miles from Lancre. Tom John left the stage to thunderous applause at the concluding act of The Troll of Ankh. I wonder what that one's supposed to be. 100 people would go home tonight, wondering whether trolls were really as bad as they had hitherto thought. Although, of course, this wouldn't actually stop them disliking them in any way whatsoever. Well patted him on the back as he sat down at the make-up table and started scraping off the thick gray sludge that was intended to make him look like a walking rock. "Well done," he said. "The love scene. Just right. And when you turned around and roared at the wizard, I shouldn't think there was a dry seat in the house." "I know." Quell rubbed his hands together. "We can afford a tavern tonight," he said. "So if we just—" "We'll sleep in the carts," said Tom John. Firmly. Sharky say that one took me a second. Squinting at himself in the shard of mirror. "But you know how much the king gave us. There could be feather beds all the way home." "It's straw mattresses and a good profit for us," said Tom John. "And that'll buy you gods from heaven and demons from hell, and the wind and the waves, and more trapdoors than you can count, my lawn ornament." Quell's hand rested on Tom John's shoulder for a moment. Then he said, "You're right, boss." "Certainly I am. How's the play going?" What play?" said Quell innocently. Tom John carefully removed a plaster brow ridge. "You know," he said, "that one. The Lancre King." "Oh, coming along, you know. I'll get it right one of these days." Quell changed the subject with speed. "You know, we could work our way down to the river and take a boat home. That would be nice, wouldn't it?" "But we could work our way home over land and pick up some more cash. That would be better, wouldn't it?" Tom John grinned. "We took 103 pence tonight. I counted heads during the judgment speech. That's nearly 1 silver piece after expenses." "You're your father's son, and no mistake," said Quell. Tom John sat back and looked at himself in the mirror. "Yes," he said, "I thought I had better be." And there's Granny's blessing right there. Aw. Magrat didn't like cats and hated the idea of mousetraps. She'd always felt that it should be possible to come to some sort of arrangement with creatures like mice, so that all available food was rationed in the best interest of all parties. This was a very humanitarian outlook, which is to say that it was not a view shared by mice, and therefore her moonlit kitchen was alive. When there was a knocking at the door, the entire floor appeared to rush toward the walls. Blah. After a few seconds, the knocking came again. There was another pause. Then the knocking rattled the door on its hinges, and a voice cried, "Open in the name of the king!" A second voice, in hurt tones, said, "You don't have to shout like that. Why did you shout like that? I didn't order you to shout like that. It's enough to frighten anybody, shouting like that." "Sorry, sire. It goes with the job, sire." "Just knock again. A bit more gently, please." The knocking might have been a bit softer. Magrat's apron dropped off its hook on the back of the door. Are you sure I can't do it myself? It's not done, sire. King's knocking at humble cottage doors. Best leave it to me. Open in the... Sergeant! Sorry, sire. Forgot myself. Try the latch. There was the sound of someone being extremely hesitant. Don't like the sound of that, sire, said the invisible sergeant. Could be dangerous. If you want my advice, sire, I'd set fire to the thatch. Set fire? Yes, sirree. Or, yes, sire. Probably more yes, sire. Yes, sire. We always do that if they don't answer the door. Brings them out a treat. I don't think that would be appropriate, Sergeant. I think I'll try the latch, if it's all the same to you. Breaks my heart to see you do it, sire. Well, I'm sorry. You could at least let me buff it up for you. No! Well, couldn't I just set fire to the privy? Absolutely not. That chicken house over there looks as if it would go up like... Sergeant! Sire! Go back to the castle! What? And leave you all alone, sire? This is a matter of extreme delicacy, Sergeant. I am sure you are a man of sterling qualities, but there are times when even a king needs to be alone. It concerns a young woman, you understand? Ah, point taken, sire. Thank you. Help me dismount, please. Sorry about all that, sire. Tactless of me. Don't mention it. If you need any help getting her a light... Please go back to the castle, Sergeant. Yes, sire. If you're sure, sire. Thank you, sire. Sergeant? Yes, sire? I shall need someone to take my cap and bells back to the Fools' Guild in Ankh-Morpork now I'm leaving. It seems to me you're the ideal man. Thank you, sire. Much obliged. It's your, burning desire to be of service. Yes, sire? Make sure they put you up in one of the guest rooms. Yes, sire. Thank you, sire. Colonel says, when all you have is a torch, everything looks really flammable. There was the sound of a horse trotting away. A few seconds later, the latch clonked, and the fool crept in. It takes considerable courage to enter a witch's kitchen in the dark, but probably no more than it takes to wear a purple shirt with velvet sleeves and scalloped edges. It had this in its favor, though. There were no bells on it. He had brought a bottle of sparkling wine and a bouquet of flowers, both of which had gone flat during the journey. He laid them on the table and sat down by the embers of the fire. He rubbed his eyes. It had been a long day. He wasn't, he felt, a good king, but he'd had a lifetime of working hard at being something he wasn't cut out to be, and he was persevering. As far as he could see, none of his predecessors had tried at all. So much to do, so much to repair, so much to organize. On top of it all, there was the problem with the Duchess. Somehow he'd felt moved to put her in a decent cell in an airy tower. She was a widow, after all. He felt he ought to be kind to widows. But being kind to the Duchess didn't seem to achieve much. She didn't understand it. She thought it was just weakness. He was dreadfully afraid that he might have to have her head cut off. No, Being a king was no laughing matter. He brightened up at the thought. There was that to be said about it. And, after a while, he fell asleep. The Duchess was not asleep. She was currently halfway down the castle wall on a rope of knotted sheets, having spent the previous day gradually chipping away the mortar around the bars of her window, although, in truth, you could hack your way out of the average Lancre castle wall with a piece of cheese. Sato Nanami, trying to tell me about a website for reading audiobooks? Well, thank you, and also welcome. We're just on the last 5 pages of Wyrd Sisters by Sir Terry Pratchett. The fool! He'd given her cutlery and plenty of bedclothes. That was how these people reacted. They let their fear do their thinking for them. They were scared of her, even when they thought they had her in their power. And the weak never had the strong in their power, never truly in their power. If she'd thrown herself in prison, she would have found considerable satisfaction in making herself regret she'd ever been born. I like that line. But they'd just given her blankets and worried about her. Well, she'd be back. There was a big world out there, and she knew how to pull the levers that made people do what she wanted. She wouldn't burden herself with a husband this time, either. Weak. He was the worst of them. No courage in him to be as bad as he knew he was, inside. She landed heavily on the moss, paused to catch her breath, and then, with the knife ready in her hand, slipped away along the castle walls and into the forest. She'd go all the way down to the far border and swim the river there, or maybe build a raft. By morning, she'd be too far away for them to ever to find her, and she doubted very much that they'd ever come looking. Weak. She moved through the forest with surprising speed. There were tracks, after all, wide enough for carts, and she had a pretty good sense of direction. Besides, all she needed to do was go downhill. If she found the gorge, then she just had to follow the flow. And then there seemed to be too many trees. There was still a track, and it went more or less in the right direction, but the trees on either side of it were planted rather more thickly than one might expect, and when she tried to turn back, there was no track at all behind her. She took to turning suddenly, half expecting to see the trees moving, but they were always standing stoically and firmly rooted in the moss. She couldn't feel a wind, but there was a sighing in the treetops. "All right," she said, under her breath. "All right. I'm going anyway. I want to go, but I will be back." It was at this point that the track opened out into a clearing that hadn't been there the day before, and wouldn't be there tomorrow. A clearing in which the moonlight glittered off assembled antlers and fangs and serried ranks of glowing eyes. The weak, banded together, can be pretty despicable, but it dawned on the Duchess that an alliance of the strong can be more of an immediate problem. There was total silence for a few seconds, broken only by a faint panting, and then the Duchess grinned, raised her knife, and charged the lot of them. The front ranks of the massed creatures opened to let her pass, and then closed in again. Even the rabbits. The kingdom exhaled. It was a little grim, wasn't it? On the moors, under the very shadow of the peaks, the mighty nocturnal chorus of nature had fallen silent. The crickets had ceased their chirping, the owls had hooted themselves into silence, and the wolves had other matters to attend to. There was a song that echoed and boomed from cliff to cliff, and resounded up the high hidden valleys, causing miniature avalanches. It funneled along the secret tunnels under glaciers, losing all meaning as it rang between the walls of ice. To find out what was actually being sung, you would have to go all the way back down to the dying fire by the standing stone, where the cross resonances and waves of conflicting echoes focused on a small, elderly woman who was waving an empty bottle. "With a snail if you slow to a crawl, but the hedgehog—" "It tastes better at the bottom of the bottle, doesn't it?" Magrat said, trying to drown out the chorus. "That's right," said Granny, draining her cup. "Is there any more?" "I think Githa finished it, by the sound of it." Sharky say, "Bard!" Was someone being grim? Did I miss? Oh, I said that was grim. Of course, yeah, that was me. I'm Bard. Or that was Bard. I don't know. They sat on the fragrant heather and stared up at the moon. "Well, we've got a king," said Granny. "And there's an end of it." "It's thanks to you and Nanny, really," said Magrat, and hiccuped. "Why?" "None of them would have believed me if you hadn't spoken up." "Only because we was asked," said Granny. "Yes, but everyone knows witches don't lie. That's the important thing. I mean, everyone could see they looked so alike, but that could have been coincidence. You see," Magrat blushed, "I looked up droit de seigneur. Goody Whemper had a dictionary." Nanny Ogg stopped singing. "Yes," said Granny Weatherwax. "Well." Magrat became aware of an uncomfortable atmosphere. "You did tell the truth, didn't you?" she said. "They really are brothers, aren't they?" "Oh, yes," said Githa Ogg. "Definitely. I saw to his mother when the new king was born, and to the queen when young Tom John was born, and she told me who his father was." "Githa!" "Sorry." The wine was going to her head, but the wheels in Magrat's mind still managed to turn. "Just a minute," she said. "I remember the fool's father," said Nanny Ogg, speaking slowly and deliberately. "Very personable young man, he was. He didn't get on with his dad, you know, but he used to visit sometimes, to see old friends." "He made friends easily," said Granny. "Among the ladies," agreed Nanny. "Very athletic, wasn't he? Could climb walls like nobody's business, I remember hearing." "He was very popular at court," said Granny. "I know that much." "Oh, yes, with the queen at any rate." "The king used to go out hunting such a lot," said Granny. "It was that droit of his," said Nanny.
Always out and about with it, he was. Hardly ever home o' nights.
Just a minute, Magrat repeated. They looked at her. Yes, said Granny. You told everyone they were brothers, and that Verence was the older. That's right. And you let everyone believe that... Granny Weatherwax pulled her shawl around her. We're bound to be truthful, she said. But there's no call to be honest. No, no. What you're saying is that the King of Lancre isn't really... What I'm saying is, said Granny firmly, that we've got a king who is no worse than most, and better than many, and who's got his head screwed on right.
Even if it is against the thread,
said Nanny. And the old king's ghost has been laid to rest happy. There's been an enjoyable coronation, and some of us got mugs we weren't entitled to, them being only for the kiddies, and, all in all, things are a lot more satisfactory than they might be. That's what I'm saying. Never mind what should be, or what might be, or what ought to be. It's what things are that's important. But he's not really a king.
He might be, said Nanny.
But you just said...
Who knows? The late king wasn't very good at counting. Anyway, he doesn't know he isn't royalty.
And you're not going to tell him, are you? Said Granny Weatherwax. Magrat stared at the moon, which had a few clouds across it. No, she said. Right then, said Granny. Anyway, look at it like this. Royalty has to start somewhere. It might as well start with him. It looks as though he means to take it seriously, which is a lot further than most of them take it. He'll do. Magrat knew she had lost. You always lost against Granny Weatherwax. The only interest was in seeing exactly how. But I'm surprised at the two of you. I really am, she said. You're witches. That means you have to take care about things like truth and tradition and destiny, don't you? That's where you've been getting it all wrong, said Granny. Destiny is important, see? But people go wrong when they think it controls them. It's the other way around.
Bugger destiny,
agreed Nanny. Granny glared at her. After all, you never thought being a witch was going to be easy, did you? I'm learning, said Magrat. She looked across the moor, where a thin rind of dawn glowed on the horizon. I think I'd better be off, she said. It's getting early.
Me too,
said Nanny Og.
Our Cheryl frets if I'm not home when she comes to get my breakfast.
Granny carefully scuffed over the remains of the fire. When shall we three meet again? She said. The witches looked at one another sheepishly.
I'm a bit busy next month, said Nanny. Birthdays and such. And the work has really been piling up with all this hurly-burly, you know. And there's all the ghosts to think about.
I thought you sent them back to the castle, said Granny.
Well, they didn't want to go,
said Nanny vaguely.
To be honest, I've got used to them around the place. They're company of an evening. They hardly scream at all now.
That's nice, said Granny. What about you, Magrat? There always seems to be such a lot to do at this time of year, don't you find? Said Magrat. Quite, said Granny Weatherwax, pleasantly. It's no good getting yourself tied down to appointments all the time, is it? Let's just leave the whole question open, shall we?
They nodded. And, as the new day wound across the landscape, each one busy with her own thoughts, each one a witch alone, they went home. Footnote. There is a school of thought that says that witches and wizards can never go home. They went, though, just the same. End of footnote. The end. We did it! That was fun. So, thoughts? Everyone have a good time? Booksperson Bruce says, woohoo! Or maybe if it's more of a woohoo! Oh boy. Hey Google, turn on desk lights.
Got it. Turning on floor lights.
We did it, everyone. We finished another book. This one took, let's see. Today is our 15th stream of Wyrd Sisters. So, 15 streams. Farmer says, I do like that they kind of left things open in terms of what happens next, and also that the Fool and Tom John were brothers, but not through who you'd think. Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny little twist right at the very end, huh? Neither of them are descended from the previous king. One of them is descended from the previous queen. The queen wasn't very good at counting. Yeesh. Yeah, so 15 streams, so what? Like 7.5 weeks to finish this book, I think. Sharky say it goes back to headology. Everything's based off what they think. Bookspurs and Booze reiterating the queen wasn't good at counting. Sharky say the people and kingdom think the Fool is royalty, so he is. Yeah. The people and the kingdom and the Fool. I mean, the new king. There's the second Rex. And he'll be a serious king. Yeah. Even if he is still slipping puns into his sentences. The end there saying that the sergeant had, what did he say? Here it is. Burning desire. It's your burning desire to be of service. Ugh. Spurs and Booze says perception is truth. It's all headology. It's a good book. I think it's got some slow bits in it. And some parts where you're kind of lingering thinking like, how is this all going to tie together? But I think that that's what makes it feel pretty satisfying in the end. Everything comes together. You can see how most bits are going to come together, right? You can see a few of the plot points coming, right? Even the bit about the Fool
you know, if you're paying attention, you can figure that out. That's kind of, they start dropping hints in the last third of the book about that. Maybe there's some before that, but there's definitely some heavier hints in like the last third. But there's just a few, like the way that in which everything ties together at the end is quite well done. It says we get some edge pieces, maybe a few sections put together in the middle, but it's not the whole picture until it's done. Jigsaw puzzle. Huh? Hey, Sato Nanami followed the channel. Thank you. That reminds me, I've got to get around to actually, like, finishing the whole affiliate thing so that we can get some badges and custom emotes and things like that. That'll be fun. Try and find some time to get that finished. Yeah. This was a lot of fun. Gotta love all the, like, references to every, like, Brothers Grimm witch there ever was. And also somewhat to Disney witches, is like the Disney takes on those, I feel like. And even some of the, like, you know, was it a spinning wheel or a needle or was it a thorn? Poisoned apples. Once Black Alice was referenced, we got a lot of that stuff. Apparently, Black Alice was every Disney witch. Or Brothers Grimm. All just rolled into one. Well, it is 8:45 Pacific time. I will definitely be back on Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. And we'll need to start a new book, huh? We finished one. 7.5 weeks. Wonder how that compares to some of my previous books. Let's take a quick look. So if this one was 15 streams, it looks like Queen of Sorcery was 20. Queen of Sorcery took 5 more streams than this one did. Pawn of Prophecy was quite a bit shorter. Pawn of Prophecy may have been the same amount as this one, 15. Is that right? Yeah, because I haven't done today's thumbnail yet. And Guards was 18. 18 total. And The Hobbit was 19. So actually Queen of Sorcery was the one that took us the longest at 20. Followed by The Hobbit, then Guards, then Pawn of Prophecy and Wyrd Sisters were tied for shortest. Interesting. Some random stats for y'all there. Sharky say this was a good light-hearted break from the Belgariad, which does have moments of levity, but overall heavier in content. Yeah, a little less laughter with the Belgariad, but I guess probably what feels like more character depth to me. Right? You learn more about... Because it's not that there isn't character growth in Pratchett books, but I guess, you know, it's either some more shallow growth over one book, or maybe more extended growth over a long period of time. but that second category is pretty rare. And even then, I feel like it doesn't. Most characters don't change that much. There's a couple of exceptions, but I feel like you learn more about the characters in the Belgariad. And the world is, less comical overall, which is good and bad, right? So what is everybody thinking now? Books, Brews, and Booze has not been here for most of the Belgariad. We've read two books out of the Belgariad so far. Pawn of Prophecy and Queen of Sorcery. So you'd be coming in right in the middle, because it's a 5-book series, which is then technically followed by another 5-book series, which picks up right where the Belgariad ends. So we'd be going into book 3 if we did that. Books 1 and 2 I do have up fully on YouTube under the same name, Sleet Reads. But yeah. So that's probably, I feel like that's definitely an option, is going into book 3, which is what? Magician's Gambit, I think? I think Magician's Gambit is next. Because we have had sort of a one-off book excursion here with Wyrd Sisters. I mean, there are more Witches books that follow, but, each is more self-contained than the Belgariad, which is more of a continuing story. Something to think about. We can figure it out on Friday, but go take a look. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be quick to catch up, because if you did feel like going back and watching them, because like I said, Pawn of Prophecy was 15 streams and Queen of Sorcery was 20, I think. So it would be a bit of a catching up to do, but they are a lot of fun. The books are great. I've read them many times, which is why we've been doing them on this channel, because I wanted to share them with people. But they're a lot of fun. They're similar in tone, maybe, to The Hobbit. I'd say they're probably a little more serious and more character development than The Hobbit, but not as heavy as Lord of the Rings. Farmos is excited to hear the voices again. I am going to need to remember the voices. Let's see. I'm pretty sure, Barak is easy enough. Silk, I'm pretty sure I could get without too much trouble. Aunt Pole should be fine. Garion himself might need a little adjusting, because he's growing up a little. Just listen to my previous streams, yeah. Mr. Wolf. We had a break from Mr. Wolf there at the end of Queen of Sorcery. He vanished for a while. Mander Allen shouldn't be too bad. He's pretty close to Tom John and such. Sinedra. Sinedra is going to take some catching up on, because I was getting a pretty good Sinedra, I think. For me, anyways. The best that I was going to be capable of. But she's probably going to be the one that I'm going to have to go back and check what I was doing, because I have a vague remembrance of kind of I'm not sure. That one's going to be tough. You could get them from the library, the audiobooks. I'm curious how that would compare. I don't know. I am curious how my stream compares to actual professional recordings. Armo says if that's what we end up deciding. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm talking about this as if it's already set, but let's do a vote on it on Friday. We'll talk over some options, see what people are feeling, and see what everyone wants. But Rawakio says a little less reading of the chat in the professional audiobooks. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I want to get the Twitch chat visibly on screen, like right here. My main reason for wanting to do that is so that if anybody's catching up on YouTube, they can see the chat that I'm responding to. So I've got to figure that out for my future stuff so that, yeah, people can catch up that way. We saw this picture of a window of like a Mexican restaurant somewhere in the States that it had like, they had text on the window and it said like, I'm into tacos, fitness taco in my mouth. And it's like, did you get it that wrong on purpose? Like, that feels so wrong that like it almost has to be intentional. Well, it wasn't even the word fitness spelled like that. They'd put like an apostrophe in the middle. Like that kind of, or something. I'm into tacos. Fitness taco in my mouth. They tried. I don't know. Farmer says either way, the wrong pun. Yeah. Well, the wrong... Yeah. Wrong construction of the pun anyways. Maybe we should have tacos for dinner. Oh no, it works. They did it right. Roakio Googled it and it's on t-shirts. Wow. Oh boy. Alright, well, thank you very much everyone for getting through this book with me. That's been a lot of fun. We did it. Wyrd Sisters come to a close. It's a little sad that this copy doesn't have the amazing Kirby artwork, cover art. I think it's, Jack Kirby or something like that, I think. I don't see anyone on my followed list streaming right now. Is there anyone that I should raid out to? It's getting late, so I might just wrap things up. But yeah, please come visit on Friday, and let's figure out what to read next. Start a new adventure or continue an existing one. I'm looking forward to it either way. I'm going to need a new outfit. I've been wearing this for the entirety of Wyrd Sisters, so going to need something new. Josh Kirby. Jack Kirby does superheroes. I was thinking, I was saying Jack Kirby and going I'm pretty sure that's a comic book artist. Josh Kirby. Apparently there's more than one Kirby with illustrations. Although, is Jack Kirby an artist or a writer? I think... You thought you recognized it and wanted to double check. Yeah, while I was saying it, I was like, I am pretty sure... That's why I just said Kirby the first time. I was like, without the amazing Kirby cover art. And then I was like, something with a J. Jack Kirby? Thought that was superheroes. Fitness taco in my mouth. Alright, I'm going to say goodnight. Apparently Jack is artist, writer, and editor. Wow. Yeah. Have a good rest of the week, everyone. Peppy? Puppy hears me wrapping things up and is waiting over in the wings. Yeah. Have a good rest of the week. Hopefully I'll see you all on Friday. Good night. Bye.